And what I want to explore is what type of thing do we need to do? How do we create this perspective shift, this change in approach to the game, specifically from the top players? Because I think the thing I really want to repeat from what you said there was if the top players don't care.
Okay, so we are finally getting back into the Abyss storyline from Joshua Williamson's Batman because it just finished, right? In the first video that we did, we basically covered this idea of like the return of Batman Incorporated. For those of you guys who don't know what that meant, the long story being short is basically Batman took like the Batman concept worldwide and just set up like different Batman teams in different parts of the world, some of which were rolled over into the main family in Gotham City, others just kind of continued on out there. It was really just based on the popularity of the character when DC introduced those individuals. But essentially what had happened is that something had gone on where Batman Incorporated, right, these people out there, where they had essentially killed a guy by the name of Abyss. And so the result of this is that Batman is currently investigating it, only to find out that because he had basically lost his fortune due to the events of the Joker War and Joker and basically Punchline essentially taking all his money, that Batman Incorporated had basically lost their funding as well, only to turn around and find themselves funded by Lex Luthor. And so that's where we are here at the moment, where basically Batman and Lex Luthor are essentially meeting, and we're sort of learning what's going on behind the scenes, that Lex Luthor was funding Batman Incorporated. And so that's kind of the funny thing is that Lex Luthor really seems to be pretty legal here, right? In the sense that he's like, I'm cooperating with law enforcement. I fully support them and this city, right? Like I'm basically a legit guy. Now this is done from the perspective in that following his experiences where he had basically been like a version of Superman, albeit one that was technologically based, where he had actually been Darkseid at one point in time, that if you guys recall the events of like Forever Evil, when essentially the crime syndicate invaded the earth and that all the superheroes were essentially captured and Lex Luthor had to basically bring together villains in order to turn them into heroes in order to basically save the world and the heroes themselves, that he's had a lot of lessons over the course of this time. And one of those lessons is that he essentially has turned over a new leaf, right? He's basically gone legit. But in the middle of this meeting, of course, you end up having the cops who show up. They realize it's a Batman and they just open fire, right? It's really just kind of like this kill on sight order. Now, of course, Bruce Wayne basically throws down a smoke bomb and essentially everybody ends up, basically, blinded and whatnot. And then he essentially preserves the crime scene. And like, that's basically it, right? Everything's kind of sorted. And so following that, you basically switch up with Lex Luthor inviting Bruce Wayne to dinner. Now, one of the things to remember is Lex Luthor knows Bruce Wayne's Batman, and he's known for a very long time, right? That's not really a relatively new thing. But he kind of tells this bit of a story about a bottle of wine and how expensive it is and kind of pours it out. It's not really a necessary thing. What is important here is he says, I know you're broke. Like, I know you lost everything financially. I'm currently funding Batman Incorporated, let me fund you. Like, in effect, he's giving Batman a job offer, right? He's like, come and work for me. Like, work for me as Batman. You'll stay in Gotham City, you'll do your thing, you can run it however you want to, but I'll be the financier, right? I'll be the one to financially back you. Of course, it also pisses him off. You can run it however you want to, but I'll be the financier, right? I'll be the one to financially back you. Of course, it also pisses him off. But it's one of these things where Bruce Wayne just doesn't trust Lex Luthor, where like no matter what goes on, that regardless of what kind of perception he puts on, that Lex Luthor is always involved in some shady stuff, right? There's always something that's just not right here. And so what you end up getting is basically this body of Abyss that's being examined by Batman, and at the same time it's supposed to be in the morgue. Now what ends up happening is, of course, the body that was left in the morgue was basically a decoy, right? Like what happens is it seems like Bruce Wayne has his hands on the actual body of Abyss, but then suddenly everything starts going dark. Batman goes to throw some flashbangs to try to bring in some light, but essentially everything's just kind of darkened out. And none of his lights really seem, or none of his tools seem to work, right? Night vision, infrared, none of it works. But that's when he's met by the arrival of Abyss, right? He can see himself, he just can't see anything else around him. And so in that moment, that's when he realizes, okay, so like Abyss is here, right? He's like, Abyss is a guy who's actually alive. This body is a fake body. He picked up on that pretty fast because Abyss was killed not too long ago. This body is a person who's basically been decaying for a couple months, so the timetables just simply don't add up. But he's kind of like, okay, cool. So like, you know, it's kind of one of those Dark Knight Rises kind of things, you know, like you know, you adopted the dog, you know, that kind of a thing, right? Where he's like, look, I'm Batman, I fight in the dark. So having darkness here is not going to do you any good. The thing about this though is that Abyss he's not your average bear. This is not just some average guy using the darkness to his own tools. Instead, he kind of taunts him to a degree when Batman asks him like, who are you? He's like, I'm a creature of the darkness, right? Born in the shadows, just like you. And he's like, the voices in the dark are my only master. I don't work for Lex Luthor, because that's the initial response to the question of Bruce Wayne is, how are you involved with Lex Luthor? Like, do you work for him?
Ever got to a place where all your senses told you to turn back and leave?
And so ultimately, he actually ends up managing to overcome Batman. And the reason for this is because he's fast and he's silent. He's almost ninja in nature, and it's really something that Batman hasn't seemed to counter before. More so than that, it's not simply an attack on Bruce Wayne. That what happens is because of the scythe he's using and the way he's able to injure Bruce Wayne, he basically blinds him, right? He leaves Bruce Wayne blinded. And that's literally one of the things, right? Like this cop he's been working with, she comes running up on him. She's like, look, we got to get out of here, right? The whole building's getting ready to go on lockdown. We have to get out of here now. And he says, I can't, right? She's like, look, we got to get out of here, right? The whole building's getting ready to go on lockdown. We have to get out of here now. And he says, I can't, right? Everything is too dark. That he has in effect lost his sight as a result of the actions or the injury that was done to him by Abyss, right? That Abyss has some kind of tool at his disposal when it comes to this stuff. Now, the first thing Batman has to do here is figure out how to reverse this blindness, right? It's the first thing he has to do. Figure out how to get this blindness removed and how to essentially regain his ability to see. And he was just like, you know, as far as I can tell, there's no real way to do this, but I need to get to a place that's dark. I need to get to a place where I can basically operate without anybody knowing who I am or anybody being able to see me, and that even includes the cop herself, right? So of course they end up going to her apartment, which is kind of a weird place. Abyss also catches up to Lex Luthor, which is something that happens. We don't really get a whole lot here. We basically just get him like powering up this Batman suit, which really looks amazing, right? Like Lex Luthor essentially becomes Batman, which is pretty legit. But the thing about this is that Lex Luthor is not on the same level as Bruce Wayne when it comes to like fighting and when it comes to just tactics and so on. So he is seemingly overcome by Abyss pretty fast, right? We don't see what happens. We just see the two of them engage in a fight, and that's seemingly it. The other thing here is that ultimately Bruce Wayne can't really seem to find a way to heal his eyesight. And so he's ultimately just kind of stuck there being blind. And so he says, okay, fine. Then the next thing we have to do here is get a hold of Batman Incorporated. We have to find out why the body in the morgue was a decoy, right? Like there's something bigger going on here and they know what's going on, right? Like we have to know why they went after Abyss. They have all the answers to the questions that we have. And so one of the things that this detective says is like, look, Lex Luthor funds all the prisons, right? State-of-the-art security, all that kind of stuff. And the warden who runs it is in no doubt trying to make sure that he stays in Lex Luthor's good graces. So what's likely going to happen to your members of Batman Incorporated is they're all going to be shuffled off to solitary confinement, right? 23-hour lockdown, if not 24-hour lockdown, just kind of, consistently. You're never going to be able to get to them. The only way to access them is when they're being transferred. And that's exactly what happens. That Batman basically catches up to them as they're all being transferred to solitary confinement, takes out all the lights, and where they initially think it's Abyss due to the fact that they've encountered Abyss before, and this whole scenario unfolds the same way, Batman appears and says, no, this is my move, right? And initially he tells them, like, get to the roof. Like, you need to get to the roof and we need to have a discussion. The response to them is, no, that's not going to happen. They basically turn against Batman, right? Like, he's like, look, I know you guys are all innocent. I know what's going on with Abyss, or at least I seem to have some idea with Abyss. I know he's not dead, right? That means you all didn't kill him. We need to go talk. And where it's kind of like where they ask him, like, why are you talking weird? That kind of a thing, where he seems a little off kilter, seems a little strange. At the end of the day, he starts kind of interrogating them, right? Treating them almost like people he doesn't trust, right? He's like, at least tell me how Lex Luthor's involved with Batman Incorporated. Why would you work for someone like him? Is it the money? And the reality here is the reason why Batman Incorporated was formed, or at least the reason why these individuals were chosen, is because money is not their god. They don't pursue money. It's not the thing they're looking for. They're not mercenaries. They do what they do because they legitimately believe that it's the right thing to do. And so because of that, they're just kind of like, no. They almost kind of take offense to it. It was like, Lex Luthor gave us more than money. He gave us a mission. And then when Batman asked, like, what mission was Lex Luthor give you? They're like, why do you care? Right? Like, we didn't need you before and we don't need you now. And they ultimately end up attacking him, right? Like, Batman has to fight his own organization, right? Batman versus Batman Incorporated. And it's cool to see because he is able to overcome them to a degree. Like, the cop who's in his earpiece talking to him is trying to tell him what to do, and he's like, stop, right? Like, you're a distraction. Batman focusing on his sound or focusing on his hearing is able to basically pick up where each one of these guys are coming from and is able to counter them accordingly, but just really kind of lashes out here, right? Like talk to me, right? Why would you work with Lex Luthor, a Batman that's that shady? But then suddenly the cops basically come out of nowhere, and then there's like, let's get to the roof, right? They basically take off. Once they arrive up on the rooftop, of course, him being surrounded, Lex Luthor arrives on the scene. And that's when, of course, we end up finding one, Lex Luthor survived, and two, seemingly, Lex Luthor is not blind. At the same time that happens, you end up having Abyss, who arrives on the scene as well. And ultimately, what Lex Luthor says here is the only possible way for you to stop Abyss is to basically come with me, right? Like, you have to work for me. I can provide you the tools, the assets, the things that you need. It's very, very cryptic, and it's very weird because what it looks like is Lex Luthor has essentially set all this up. And the response of Batman is like, what games are you playing, right? What did you do? How are you involved in this? But ultimately, the members of Batman Incorporated chime in and say, like, you don't understand it, Batman. Like, you don't get what's going on. Lex Luthor may very well have funded our whole Batman Incorporated situation here following you losing all your money. But this is our leader.
Not the blue cape like the 70s. Like, where was it here?
Like, let's get
Like this. The yellow symbol. The current
except
suit.
he has pockets.
Yeah, nothing wrong with pockets.
A little bit like Earth One.
Not.
Earth One has the that symbol.
Time. Right now?
I don't know.
Ooh. Seriously? Willing to meet up pretty much. I'm gonna ask if this. Ooh, I need a Two-Face. That's the animated series, Ryan.
I know.
Ryan, here's the Houdini and Luini.
It may look easy, raising livestock, harvesting and hauling crops, but you know,
Cause this shit's awkward as hell. You've been straight tripping, won't look inside of yourself. And my heart is racing 1,000,000 miles. Cause of why?
Let it go, can't hold it back anymore. Let it go, turn away and slam the door.
You know, my love, you know, my love, I'm here for you. You know.
You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one.
I don't know you, but I want you.
Daylight come and me want go home. Day, me Sunday, me Sunday, me Sunday, me Sunday, me Sunday. Oh. Daylight. Come and me wanna go home. Wanna go home. Daylight come and me wanna go home. Daylight come and me wanna go home. Daylight come and me wanna go home.
Pitter patter, pitter patter. Love has gone, so what can matter? No sweet lover man.
Daylight come and me wanna go home. Daylight come and me wanna go home.
Pitter patter, pitter patter. Love has gone, so what can matter? No sweet lover man.
Daylight come and me wanna go home. Daylight come and me wanna go home.
Pitter patter, pitter patter. Love has gone, so what can matter? No